Let's take a look now at creating an object inside SiteModeler. We're going to look at the pond first. This will demonstrate some basic tools that we can use on any object, really. So we're going to look at creating the pond object, and the pond is going to be set below the ground surface with slopes coming up. We're going to have a berm around the pond, and we'll check the volume of the pond as well. So we're going to begin in our training guide on page 8, 1-8. So in our design file, siteplan2d.dgn, I'm going to go ahead and jump back into my project file, where we're going to focus on creating a pond. So I'm going to visually kind of zoom over to the pond, and I will now create an object. So under Modeler, I'm going to go to the Object pull down and select New. The object type that I'm creating is going to be a pond. The object name defaults to Pond 1 based on my project preferences. And I want to go ahead and add this pond to the active model. So I toggle that on. Click OK, and now I'm working on the pond. So I can see here I have an active site object control tool frame that's open and up when I'm in Modeler, and it shows me the model and object that I'm working with. I also have the ability to turn the view off as far as display of contours or anything that Modeler is displaying. This is dockable and can be pushed up to the top. So after I create the object, now I want to start creating elements and put those elements in that object. So I go to Modeler, Elements, New. The first thing I'm going to work with is this blue pond bottom shape. I want to create or assign elevation to that. I'm going to assign elevation, and when I'm done, I'm going to have it add it to the active object, pond 1. We give you 6 ways to assign elevation to elements. We give you 5 ways to assign elevation to a point, and later on we'll look at creating sections. That's multiple elements at once in a section. But first, let's take a look at element. I can assign elevation to an element based on a slope from another element, based on a slope from a point, based on a slope from a point but stay on the element and go along it. Drape, calculate the elevation by draping that element on a surface above or below it. So, calculating it based on a surface. I can assign elevation simply by keying in the elevation that I want. That's called constant elevation. And then I have it use alignment, where I have a chain and profile in coordinate geometry, and I can assign elevation based on that information. I'm going to use the Drape on Model Object tool. So select that tool, and we're going to set the feature type. So here's where I'm going to assign the feature type as break line. So we're assigning the DTM feature type. And then how do we want to assign elevation? I'm going to assign elevation by draping this on the object ground 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to look in this area at the object surface ground 1, and we're going to figure out the elevation. And I want to figure out the elevation at a certain point. In my case, I want it to be minimum elevation in that area. But we could also say find the highest elevation in that area and use that. Go to the centroid of the shape, if it is a shape or a line. Go to the centroid of the element and give me the elevation at that point for the whole thing. I can say entire element. That would be like laying that down on the ground like a string lays on the ground. It would calculate elevation wherever the string hits the ground. Or vertices, only give me elevation at the vertices of the element D. In this case, this particular element has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertices, so it will only pick up elevation at those points, and then it would just kind of linearly interpolate between those points. In my case, so I want minimum elevation. I want to find the lowest point and use that for the entire shape. Once I do that, I want to drop it down -4 feet. Now, based on the way I'm assigning elevation, I can tell it to use reference element association. That means, hey, I need you to remember how you got your elevation. So if indeed the ground surface changes, it remembers that, hey, I'm supposed to drape at the lowest point 4 feet below that. So for whatever reason the ground surface changes, we can recalculate. So once I've done that, I simply come over to the right-hand side of the dialog. I select the highlight color. I use the Select Element tool here, and I click on the graphic. Once it's highlighted, now it's ready to be applied, or it's ready for the tool to go ahead and assign the elevation, the DTM feature, and put it in the pond object. So I click Apply, and it goes through the steps and puts this element as a break line 4 feet below ground at the lowest point inside pond 1. And then its side slopes take over and slope up till it comes back up to the ground surface. So that is how we create site elements, or one way to create site elements.